We would also like to pay respect to the elders, both past and present, and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians present. Tonight I will read the prayer under the current circumstances. Almighty God, we ask your blessing upon this council. We pray for guidance in our deliberations, and we ask you to grant us wisdom and sensitivity as we deal with the business of our shire to achieve the best outcome for the people of Nillumbik. As we are here for our community, we ask that all are kept safe and united to help each other, particularly the vulnerable and elderly in this time of stress and uncertainty. Amen. We have no apologies or presentations, but could I please have a move of the confirmation of minutes of the council meeting held on Tuesday the 25th of February 2020. Councillor Demerick. And a seconder? Councillor Brooker. All those in favour? And that is carried. Any disclosures of conflicts of interest, councillor? There being none and no petitions, we will move on to the questions from the gallery. So the first question tonight is from Ben Rancharan. Sunday, 1st of March, was Clean Up Australia Day. I arranged a clean-up event in Kangaroo Ground where 6 volunteers spent 2 hours collecting litter along the footpath on a short 1 kilometre section of the road. They collected a whopping 83 kilos of litter. Frustratingly, grass cutters had been along the heavily littered road and shredded the litter, making it impossible to clean up amongst the cut grass, which has now dried out, become fuel for bushfire. Why does council allow grass cutters to go through an area before litter is moved? Thank you, Ben, to you and your team for volunteers who collected litter. Please note on council-managed roadside, council's in-house mowing staff and contractors are required to collect litter prior to any mowing work. However, the KG Warrandyte Road is managed by Department of Transport. DOT also require their contractors to collect litter prior to mowing. So your question's actually been passed on to DOT. Question 2, what measures will council implement to raise awareness of the issue within the community, reduce the spillage from curbside garbage collection and reduce litter throughout the Greenwich Shire? With respect to curbside litter, please note council's curbside waste collection staff are required to pick up litter if it is spilled from a bin during the collection. If residents are overfilling bins, causing waste to be spilled or allowing birds to pull waste from bins, then drivers place stickers on the bins to remind residents about how to present their bins. We also support annual Clean Up Australia Day events across the Shire with skip bins and pick up the collected material. We've supported additional events due to community interest. Next we have a question from Bill Lord. Whilst council rates have been capped by a state government at about 2% in line with cost of living, the general increases in Shire's user fees was up 15% in 2017-18, another 25% in 2018-19 and 8.17% in 19-20. Now the draft 2021 budget has hefty increases in the total user fees of 17.62%. How come this 17.62% figure is not in the officer report, and how does council justify these huge increases for people who in the main are Nillumbik residents? Bit of confusion here, Bill. The increase in user fees of 17.62% refers to the amount of revenue forecast to be generated through user fees when compared to the prior year. The increase in income is not reflective of individual user fees or charges passed on to the community. The budgeted increase is reflective of an increase in the usage of council facilities. The fees and charges are disclosed in Appendix 1 on page 58 of the draft budget document. Jeremy Loftus-Hills asks council. November 21, 2019 EDAC minutes read, The strategic themes were all agreed to. Terry, on behalf of the Hurstbridge Traders Association, presented a list of performance indicators for each of the strategic themes. See attached. Why are council's promised indicators of success not written into the draft EDS, and when will council release the Hurstbridge Traders List? The Hurstbridge Traders List was never received to include in the minutes, despite being requested. There was an error in the minutes stating a document was attached. Question 2. The council plan includes the following 4-year rates commitment. Rates for established properties will be set at least 0.25% below the estimated rate cap. The draft 2021 budget states the budget proposes a 2% increase on rates for 2021, which is in line with the official rate cap set by the Victorian Government. Can council explain its intention to break the plan's rates commitment? And at this stage, council has proposed to increase rates to the full cap of 2%. This is a draft budget and is yet to be resolved by council. The budget is scheduled to be presented to council at the May OCM following a public consultation process. Colleen Hackett. Does council have a policy of giving priority to local Nillumbik people when hiring staff? No, the hire process is based on merit. Question 2. What is the percentage of current council staff who live in Nillumbik? Response: 36% of staff currently live within Nillumbik. Henry Hasler. I have noticed that from time to time council endorses activities or events occurring in the Shire. I would like to know what principles apply in deciding to agree to a council endorsement, including who makes the decision. Applications can be made for funding requests via an open grant round process with a required application form. Approval through an open grant round follows a defined process and review, dependent on the funding round conditions, which may be conducted by internal departments, managers and/or council prior to a final approval made. Alternatively, direct requests outside of a defined process can potentially be made to individual teams and will be considered on a case-by-case basis and on the nature of the individual request. To ensure activities or events on council-owned managed land are compliant, an application is made with required documentation supplied and referred to relevant internal departments for comment, feedback and cross-checking prior to approval given for such activities or events to be delivered. Question 2, relating to Shire relevant activities or events that are endorsed by council. What form does endorsement take? For example, might it include some financial assistance, such as waiving fees for use of council-owned facilities such as halls? Endorsement for activities or events can be in the form of direct funding or in-kind support such as waste removal, venue use and/or waiver of fees provided to applicants. It can also be in the form of approval to deliver an activity or event on council-owned managed land by way of a permit or agreement without funding or in-kind support provided. And such activity or event is conducted by an external party needing to adhere to conditions within a permit or agreement. Sue Dyatt. Regarding both the Eltham Activity Centre Structure Plan and the Diamond Creek Structure Plans, what are the next steps to be taken by council and elsewhere once this current period of public submissions is completed? The public consultation period will formally close on 29 April 2020. There are still 4 weeks available to have your say. Please see the Participate Nillumbik website. After the close of submissions, council officers will review feedback and make recommendations based on said feedback. Submitters will be also invited to speak if they so choose at a FNC committee, where councillors will also consider recommended changes in responding to feedback to the draft plans. The amended final structure plans will be brought to an OCM for consideration of adoption. Once adopted, the final structure plans would then be part of a planning scheme amendment to implement the structure plans into the Nillumbik Shire planning scheme. Question 2. Eltham Activity Centre Structure Plan to be superseded. The existing Eltham Activity Centre Structure Plan would be superseded upon Council's adoption of the new structure plan. John Facondo. I refer to Council's decision to use $1,455,053 from the Defined Benefit Superannuation Reserve to fund digital business transformation projects at the OCM 26 November 2019. It is my understanding that from 1st of July 2013, councils were required to ensure that there were sufficient funds in the Defined Benefits Reserve to fund all liabilities associated with council employees' superannuation benefits. Will this action of using these funds for digital transformation place the council ratepayers at risk if there is insufficient funds at Vision Super for council employees? There's no statutory requirement on councils to hold reserves for superannuation benefits. The funds were held in discretionary reserve. The risk of a call from Vision Super is an unknown factor. Vision Super has a 3-year restoration plan which has been implemented by the fund and is monitored through the industry regulator under the superannuation prudential standards. What this means that is if there were to be a shortfall, the fund has 3 years to regain its position prior to making the call. Question 2. In light of the extremely uncertain economic climate at present, is it possible that there will be a fund shortfall and a call made? Where will these funds come from if such a call is made? Vision Super is maintaining active communication with councils regarding the current market situations. If a call were to be made by Vision Super, funding options as to how to respond to the call will be presented to council at that point. And that is the last of the questions. I'm nearly eating it now. Can we turn up the volume fence, please? Glad to see that somebody's on the line, Councillor Demerick. 26, my goodness. Hi, Bill. Hi, Mary. So our first report is the Advisory Committee Report 3-20. Can I have a mover for the recommendation, Councillor Brooker? As per the recommendation, as per the papers, recommending the notes of the 4 meetings. And could I have a second, please? Councillor Clark. Councillor Brooker.
Thank you. It's interesting. This advisory committee meeting has already been referenced tonight in the questions, but I just want to make a comment on the minutes that as I read them. I mean, I'm not a member of this committee, so I can only comment on the minutes as it's the November meeting, November 21st. Okay. From that November meeting, in the discussion segment, I'm quoting, it says, the result of the discussion of the group was the green wedge is a key factor to the limited growth in population, and these factors are inhibitors to business growth. Moving on, it says there are huge opportunities to develop agribusiness in the Shire, but the negative attitude of the community has an impact. And concluding, it says the urban growth boundary creates challenges and traders don't feel supported as their businesses rely on population. A kind of interesting theme is developing by this committee. I'm sure if I'd have been present, I would have made the points that the growth in population, according to state planning policy in the Nillumbik planning scheme, can occur in those activity centres of Diamond Creek and Eltham. And indeed, most of the structure plans that we have out at the moment certainly talk about the desirability of employment anchors and indeed housing diversity that is so frequently raised as both an opportunity and indeed a solution for Nillumbik's activity centres. So I'd be interested in who they are specifically referring to when they reference negative attitudes of the community. And changing the urban growth boundary is not supported in the Green Wedge Management Plan or at this time by the state government. The draft economic development strategy has just been out for consultation, and I think it came back on March, well, it finished on March the 20th. But these meetings have been directed towards that thing, and we've had the community consultation. But the key point is, I think, that the first paragraph of the economic development strategy states, It does not seek to change the Nillumbik planning scheme which governs and guides land use development. Well, I would conclude that the Economic Advisory Committee possibly need to internalise that fact because their discussion, as reported, is somewhat at odds with that. Indeed, I would say that the most substantive part of the economic development strategy are contained in the section on the facilitation of the green economy. It references zero emissions, renewable energy, protection of ecosystems and biodiversity. It seeks to reduce environmental impacts and encourage things like lower food miles, etc. So what I'm pleased it does not do is lament the green wedge as a lost cause or impediment, but rather seeks to celebrate and elevate it as its special place within Nillumbik. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Ashton.
I'd just like to respond to Councillor Booker. I know you don't sit on this development committee, and neither do I, but if you look at the attendees on that list, I do know 4 of them, and 4 of them live in the Green Wedge. So, you know, the reality of what the committee is saying is the reality of what the committee is saying, and you know, you may be able to quote our strategies and the Green Wedge management plan, but you know, these minutes are reporting what these people who run businesses are reporting back to our offices, and you know, I think they have every right to do so, and I think this is an accurate report of potentially how those people are viewing things. So I really don't get your point.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Our first officer's report is OCM 3420, Amendment C117, Part 2, Recommendations Panel Report.
Mayor, I move the recommendation that Council notes the panel will move the recommendations 1 through to 5 as per the papers.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. And could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Perkins. Councillor Clark.
It's relatively straightforward. This is basically just dealing with the recommendations of the panel report and accepts those recommendations and enables us to proceed further on rezoning the Lot 1 Grashof Road from Hirsch Township Zone to Public Park and Recreation and remove the redundant overlays. It's been a direction this council has set since day one, really, and grows on the ever-increasing amount of public open space that this council has contributed back to the community. It will go down in history as the council that created more public open space than any other council in the history of the Shire.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Perkins.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Egan. Look, very, very happy to see that the panel did support the council position. Certainly, it's a public and the widespread community position that this land be rezoned to public park and open space and not used for residential development. I had a strong feeling on the last council this was the position. I made an election commitment to try to pursue that end, and with the help of the ward councillor, Councillor Egan, we did manage to get that motion up as the first item of business on this council. So I'm very, very proud that it's proceeded up to this point, and it will continue on, and it will be rezoned, and that land will stay in community hands for all time. So it's a very, very good result, and I thank council for their support.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins, and I applaud your sentiments. All those in favour? Oh, sorry, Councillor Brooker, my apologies.
That's okay. Look, I do support the motion and accept the C117 Part 2, which is to rezone Grashof Road. Once the council resolved not to sell the Grashof Road site and intends to remain the public landowner, the PPRZ zone does provide some certainty for the future of the precinct, which is the best outcome for both locals and Nillumbik. The history of the site goes back to another amendment, Amendment C85, a previous planning scheme amendment from the council, where the township zone was put in place and council purchased the land from the Department of Education $2.3 million was borrowed from the landfill reserve to enable the sale, with the intention that it would be repaid when the council, as proprietor vendor, on-sold the property to a developer and would then be able to dictate certain housing outcomes that it considered desirable. In this case, some housing outcomes related to social housing and the provision of such housing for the ageing parents of children with disabilities. Now, I would never ever have supported such an arrangement, such a planning scheme amendment, where so much uncertainty could surround such a transaction, that the council would act as a de facto speculator to facilitate such a transaction, which you have so many hurdles to jump, so many obstacles to overcome before your preferred outcome could be realised. Now, I have an example of, it's not just on this issue, but on other ones where I voted against or the extension, to purchase the CFA site in Main Road, 895 Main Road, Eltham, for kind of similar reasons, where the council felt you could purchase that site and where 1 + 1 could equal 2.5, if not 3. Well, it turns out that the state government not agreed to sell us that site, and it remains the property of the state government, so the council resolution became moot. Once the previous council had determined a path, it found a considerable amount of local opposition. Well, what a surprise, My vote against the resolution in December 2016 was concerned with the outlay of $2.3 million from a reserve that has still to be repaid and has not been repaid as of today's date. The $2.3 million is an enormous sum of money for the council to have outlaid and then converted to public open space. It was a very popular decision. It was popular with the objectors, who I imagine mostly lived in Hurstbridge, but it is and will be enormously costly to the remaining residents of this shire that will at some point in the future all collectively contribute to the repayment of the funds from the landfill reserve. So I would never have supported C85, which was the genesis of this problem. Once the council determined not to
Time,
proceed,
Councillor Brooker.
thank you, with that, I would have supported the rezoning as I do so tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? On that note, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour, and that is carried. We now move on to a report 3520, Amendment C125, Garramby Barn, Laughing Waters Residency Centre Project. Can I have a mover for...
Mayor, I wish to move that Council resolves to request the Minister for Planning utilise his powers under Section 20.4 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 to exempt himself from notice requirements of the Planning Scheme Amendment and request the Minister for Planning to prepare, consider and approve a Planning Scheme Amendment to the Northern Planning Scheme to insert an incorporated document in clause 45.12.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Could I have a seconder for the Councillor Ashton? Councillor Clark.
Mayor, this is something I've been fighting for since virtually the day I was elected, when we found that the previous council had abolished and not proceeded with the artist in residency project at Laughing Waters, which had been indeed very successful. It did so because at the time there was some expenditure required essentially to renovate these buildings to make them habitable for the purposes, and certainly it's not got any cheaper along the way as we've tried to resolve this matter. Even if they'd actually kept it going in some small form, we would not have had to have tried to resurrect the nature of the existing use rights for the Laughing Waters Residency project. This planning scheme amendment proposal formalises what we've already put to the Minister, which is to simply rezone this for the purposes of 2 vacant properties that sit in Parks Victoria land, currently vacant, currently disused, currently falling down around themselves. One an Alistair Knox property, or both I think were originally designed by Alistair Knox, one particularly had landscapes by Ford. It is a crying shame these buildings are not in active use at this moment, and indeed that we haven't got the residency artist in residency program going, and I hope this, moving forward, will be achieved sooner than later. It is somewhat ironic that we've had to fight tooth and nail for 3 years with the government to get this very simple process to move forward. given our numerous requests to bring this about. And indeed, the acquiescence of Parks Victoria to lease us the property to undertake this project. The irony is that, of course, the Eltham Gateway zone, which has basically been aborted by the government for a massive 11-lane freeway, was pushed through by the government in a 20-part 4 in a matter of about 2 months, with virtually no public consultation around that process at all. I have spoken directly to the Minister, who has undertaken and says to me that he would be happy to support a 20-part 4 for this, and I'm encouraged that he will do so. But I've got to say, it's taking a long time to get from Dewelp Department to get the Minister to sign this off. I only wish they'd applied the same level of speed to this that they did to the zoning changes that they made, and to remove the council from the authority for the Fitzsimmons Lane roadworks. But we live in hope that we may be able to continue with this particular process. I encourage the government to do so. They have been generous in supporting a Creative Victoria grant to assist in the renovating of the project. And we've had to do a couple of renewals of that already, trying to just keep this project going. Council stands ready and prepared to sign the lease document the moment it can legally do so, as soon as this planning scheme amendment is acceded to. So I encourage the Minister, I thank the officers for their work in diligently putting this forward, and for those in the community who are strong supporters of this and bringing back those buildings into an active use. Commend the resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Ashton.
I'm very happy to see this here tonight. I think the significance of this site, both as a part of the Eltham heritage with the Ford connection and Alastair Knox, and also more recently with the Yarra Strategic Plan, which makes specific mention of this site with regard to its Wurundjeri connection. We had the ill traps there. And also, I think we're very lucky that we had Eugene Howard as a member of our Arts Advisory Committee. Eugene was from Warrandyte. He's been running residency projects throughout Victoria and has a strong commitment to the arts. I think it was ironic that we hand out the Laughing Waters book at every citizenship ceremony, and yet the buildings and the artists' projects that were going on and described in that book are no longer in existence. And I think it's really important at the moment that we do support the arts, and the residency projects have brought so much to this shire. So I think this is another step towards that, and I very much hope that the Minister will look favourably upon it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Brooker.
Thank you. I would generally, I think, approach any sort of, I would call this a site-specific rezoning with a great deal of caution. I think the fact is here, though, and I do support the recommendation this evening, that, you know, for pretty much the reasons that are said in the report and what the councillors have outlined already tonight. But there is some historical significance to Nillumbik, although, you know, operating from 2001 to 2015, I don't regard that as being all that historically significant. I think the earlier time period when Nillumbik wasn't involved was also when the artist and residency program was run through another state government agency. You do have the Alastair Knox and Gordon Ford connections, so I do think it is, you know, certainly a worthwhile project. I would say there's some areas in the actual attachment 4 that I think I'd like some clarification on, and a couple of items I actually disagree with in terms of when it comes to the lease arrangement, but that's something hopefully we'll have the problem of addressing when we get to that point. But there's certainly some areas there that I think are a little bit uncertain. It references a 10-year, decade-long commitment. I would have personally a problem with that. There's there's not confusion, but there's a wide range of how much financially the council's supporting this program. It's between $30,000 and $60,000. I'd like to know which end of the spectrum we sit at. And I'd also just say, in terms of the funding sources, it's somewhat reaching to say that the solar energy that you're going to be generating from the property is going to be fed back into the grid and generate an income that would then, help the whole program. It might do that. There's a period, obviously, each year that it's not going to be occupied during the bushfire season, so there's that possibility. But I wouldn't expect to be getting that much money from the solar panels. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Perkins.
Thanks, Mayor Egan. Look, I'm happy to support the motion and the officer recommendation. There is no harm in the Minister providing this planning scheme amendment. I suppose, like Councillor Brooker, I do have some concerns about the ongoing cost to council, but that can be dealt with at a later time. The attachment 4 does talk about between $30,000 and $60,000 per annum for a 10-year period, inclusion of council's insurance. It also talks an additional, whether it's an additional $30,000 or $30,000 is mentioned in another part of the document. So broadly, when I was on the last council, when the decision was made that we couldn't find the $100,000 needed to bring one of the buildings up to a habitable form, the decision was made to essentially use the artists in residency money to deliver arts and culture programs across the Shire. And, I know some of this room will say we can do both, but with competing priorities, it becomes more and more difficult to do both. I'm very keen on arts and culture programs, but not continuously running those programs just in one small segment of the Nillumbik community. So the Artists in Residency program, essentially it's free rent for artists who, live in that property in Laughing Waters Road. They're generally people who have never lived in the Shire. Hopefully that can change into the future, but my concerns around the program are the ongoing costs and the value that it provides to the rest of the rate base in Nillumbik who provide the funding for it.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Our next officer's report is 03620, Graffiti Removal Plan. Can I have a mover, please?
I move that the council endorses the removal graffiti plan attachment 1 and commences a procurement process for the ongoing provision of the service.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Brooker, I think you got your hand up a smidgen before Councillor Perkins. Councillor Clark.
Mayor, this unfortunately becomes an ongoing program. This is $434,000 that was spent over the last 3 years that I'd rather we hadn't spent at all. There's only one way not to spend it, and that is for those malcontents who continue to graffiti and create perceptions of untidiness and an impact on the physical and built environment to stop it. I just want to highlight the good work of our current contractor. This is essentially going out to tender, which we're required to do to bring it in line with all other contracts of this sort of order. But the current contractor, there's no reflection on him. The fact that we're going out to tender, it's simply a local government process. But he has done a good job. And indeed, we have brought a raft of people to account. There are some that have been before the courts and have been fined and appropriate penalties have been taken. There are others who, a bit younger, have been basically with the police having been found. Mum and dad's been brought in and they've been, severely reprimanded at home as well as any other penalties. And some have been brought back on the straight and narrow and decided this is not a good way for them to continue their lifestyle. And unfortunately, some of this culture has got, which we've identified through surveillance and other things, into a drug culture in part for quite young people out of some of our local high schools. So there is very good reason, not only towards improving the betterment of the physical amenity and sort of the beauty of our shire, but also to ensure that young people who have gone off the straight and narrow for whatever reason are being brought back, assisted in understanding the error of their ways and brought back into, I guess, mainstream society in many ways, and hopefully what they might perceive as some artistic talent being brought to other causes. Essentially, we've not been blessed with, you might call, street art as a result of this. This is basically tagging, destruction of signage, an impact on the public amenity. And it's something that we do need to stop and seek to outlaw at every opportunity. The technology that we employ is not cheap. It involves a lot of surveillance cameras and the nature of how that's brought about, but it's very, very effective. There is no doubt in our annual reports, which are completed into Graffiti, we've continued to reduce the impact of it on our community during the course of this council's period in office. But we certainly can't relent in any way. We need to continue the course of actions that we do take to maintain the quality of what we do in this space. So I commend the contractor for what they're doing. And I just want to highlight that there is no reduction in the sense of service of going out to tender in this way, rather very much the retention. I know the other part, a number of councillors, and I in particular also keen to support, is what surveillance we can do to pick up any dumping of rubbish which is occurring through all parts of our shire. And we may well be able to deploy some of the technology to achieve improved outcomes in that space. We're very keen to have, as a Greenweed Shire, a beautiful and clean and prosperous city. And to achieve that, we need a policy such as this. But if we're able to get it sorted out, we can save $430,000 odd during the course. Could I just say to any of those graffiti, well, they would deem themselves graffiti artists, I don't think they are, but if you come to Nillumbik and seeking to undertake this work, there is every chance you will be caught and you will be prosecuted. Not that I'd be encouraging you to go elsewhere, you certainly should cease it. But if you want to be caught, play it out in Nillumbik and spend your time before the courts. I commend the resolution and hope we're able to get on top of this over the journey.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Any other councillors? Councillor Perkins.
Graffiti in Diamond Creek has been a big problem for a long time, and it's only with the current contractor that really those issues have been very, very successfully mitigated. So, yeah, I understand because of the procurement arrangements, we do have to go out and do this work. Get effectively start a procurement process and potentially look for a tender process through that. But the current operator has set the bar very, very high, and it has gone way above just removing graffiti. He's been extremely active. He's on the phone all the time. Quite often we've bypassed the usual system of myself as a councillor reporting into council and then eventually it gets its way through to the contractor. It's just been a matter of giving him a quick phone call and he's out there the next morning to remove graffiti. The standard has been the sooner that the graffiti is removed, the less likelihood of that graffiti coming back, and it has worked very, very well. He's not only been excellent at removing graffiti, he knows where they tend to tag, and he patrols those areas. He's very, very active on social media, because what some of these taggers do, unfortunately for them, is they like to brag about their work on social media. So our current contractor is quite good at keeping an eye on what some of these clans are doing on social media, and can put together some of the threads. It has led to as well as social media surveillance. He's also got cameras and thermal imaging and other. They think they're being smart by running around in the dark, but they're on the imagery. They're as plain as day. It's very good evidence when it gets to the magistrates' courts. There's been a number of very successful prosecutions. He manages to keep an eye on a lot of these clowns and see where they are, see if they're currently in jail, which some of them have been put in jail through our contractors' efforts in working with police, and basically knows that the spots they're going to hit next. So look, good luck to any tenderer that can meet this high bar that's been set. But just for the record, I'm very, very happy with the work that our current contractor has provided. He's provided, I think, the most excellent service that any local government could expect, and I really do hope that he is involved in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. I concur everything that Councillor Perkins has said. It's a shame we've got to go through this process from a local government point of view, because this contractor has done an awesome job and has really set the bar high. So much so that over the last couple of winters, I've noticed that he's out there at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday morning, cold, wet, dark mornings, and he's out there cleaning the graffiti up before the young kids are out there playing footy. And I think that's, he just goes way and above beyond in those areas. And making sure that it's clean before the kids get out on the field, and doing that at a number of football grounds around the area. Unfortunately, there won't be football this year, but I think it's really good the way that he's proactive in that area. Gets rid of the tagging, gets rid of the vulgar language that's written up on the brickwork and stuff before the kids and the parents get down there. So I certainly commend the resolution and encourage the current contractor to make sure there's a submission put forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Booker.
Thank you. Look, the policy I think is a good one. The part I like most about it is there is a target included, and there's a target of 15% cost reduction over the term of the contract. And that goes, I think, some way for us to assess if we are keeping ahead of the graffiti taggers. I think it's important to have a metric like that over time that reduces the cost to council, and that can demonstrate if the policy is having its desirable effect, that is to reduce the amount of graffiti. So the whole program, I think, does so. The question then becomes, does our rapid response of 24 hours induce a feeling of why bother in the mind of the tagger? That certainly is what our objective is, and it would be of value to establish if this rapid response actually resulted in what we are all seeking, which is less graffiti. And I think one of the metrics that we're trying to be looking at in the service delivery is that we would be spending less over time. That is, there would be less graffiti. So our policy would actually be effective. So I think that's a clever way of having a performance standard for something of this type. So I think it's a good policy, and we'll see what happens when it comes back to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Booker. Councillor Demery.
Thank you. Again, I'd like to commend the efforts of the current contractor. I've had 5 people stop me this month with stories about having school children attend events and having rung and had graffiti off within 12 hours, and so they don't have to put up with obscenities on public buildings and those sort of things. Also, which isn't included in the plan, but there's quite a few people within the community who would like to be deputised as graffiti removers, and whether there is an opportunity as it progresses to look at ways of letting people know the type of materials and the chemicals that are used to clean, particularly road signs and their own fences without making it worse. So there is a lot of feeling out there about it. I think it's a very important piece of work. We're very proud of the area we live in, and we would like to keep it that way. And I think this is an important step on that path. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Demery. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, we will put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Our next report, 3720, the draft temporary and community advertising signage policy.
Mayor, I move that the Council endorses the draft temporary and community signage policy, attachment 1, and releases the policy for public consultation to enable the Nillumbik community and other external stakeholders to provide feedback to the draft policy.
And can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Rankin. Councillor Clark.
Let me make a prediction. This policy will be a bit more controversial than the anti-graffiti one. I'm not going to go through second-guessing what the community will say is good, bad or indifferent. Couple of points just to make. In the Eltham end of the world, I just want to highlight there will be some signage which is already gone, which used to be in medians attached to street lighting poles, and due to the complexity of changing banners and doing stuff, that was no longer potentially possible to continue with. And so some of these flag poles with other banner opportunities to recognise seasons or public events, such as Anzac Day, etc., are looking to replace that. The second comment I would make is do not sit back and expect real estate agents who are now going to be charged for putting signs out on a Saturday morning letting you know that there's an open won't respond, because if we want to charge them for signage to put them out, every chance is they'll pass that on to the consumer. And so to have an open day on your property may now well cause you to have a cost. That's not to say, given that a number of other our abutting municipalities do exactly this, that we shouldn't put this out in a policy for public commentary, but equally do not be surprised if we get comments. Last area is really about public events. Public event signage is broadly supported by the communities, you know, whether it's a wattle festival, whether it's a Eltham Town Fair, whether it's what's happening on Montsalvat this fortnight, whether it's the art and craft market on a Sunday morning. People want to be able to get out temporarily and put their signs up. The only question is how you do that and control it. This proposal puts out a way to do that, subject to approval from effectively Vic Roads or whatever they're called this week, and proposes a way forward on that. A number of other municipalities do, again, not dissimilar things. So this will have its level of controversy, but to make sure that our community is aware of these sorts of activities, certainly groups out there in the community, as I say, such as Montsalvat and art and craft groups, want to be able to make it clear when those events are on and where they're on. The skill in this will be able to make this information available without creating additional visual clutter, and indeed to make the signage really simple so that people are not distracted whilst they're driving past it. So encourage community feedback, interested to see what they say, and we'll make some judgments upon that at the other end. Thank you.
Councillors, anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Perkins.
Look, I'm happy to support the motion for the purpose of putting out for community consultation, but I'll raise a couple of issues that I have that hopefully we can straighten out with community support. The first was just in relation to the real estate signage mentioned by Councillor Clark. The way I read the signage policy, it really doesn't relate to community advertising. It's really talking about pointer boards located throughout the Shire, you know, small A-frames or sandwich boards that announce open for inspection and auction events, not a community event, as you know. So it's about getting a permit just for those. That's not of the broad community interest, and it's just treating real estate agents the same as any other trader, which I think is appropriate. You know, to have put A-frame signs out the front of you know, Diamond Creek or Eltham, you need a street signage permit, and it's just bringing real estate agents into line, and I think that's appropriate. I do have some problems with the council event signage, and that's on page 12 of the document, attachment 1 or page 136 of the report. A couple of images there. Talks about major events sponsored by Nillumbik Shire. We'll be able to utilise and use Nillumbik Shire Council's permanent welcome to our township signs, you know, by attaching it basically a call flute to those permanent signs, areas of Eltham, Diamond Creek, Hurstbridge and Panton Hill. So my concerns around that relate to these are declared roads. To actually have that signage in the first place, we need permission from the Regional Director of Vic Roads. Those signs are prescribed fairly carefully in terms of how big the words are and what those signs need to be. And just, you know, attaching a call flute sign to that, I think flies in the face of that approval process. The approval process is there for public safety. It's to ensure that there's not ongoing distractions. Cars driving along end up veering off the road trying to read a small sign. And I think the images shown in the council report are just those sort of distractions that I don't want to see a risk to public safety through this temporary measure of getting cable ties and sticking call flute signs onto our Welcome to Township signage. The other concern I have, and the report isn't very well laid out in terms of describing where the banner, what they call the banner program, and these are these flagpole things. We've got 8 of them in Diamond Creek. I'm not a great supporter of them. It's 8 flagpoles that generally advertise exactly the same thing, and it looks like a used car lot a lot of the time. Some of the stuff that's advertised is very, very good, but I don't think it's appropriate for the civic spine of Diamond Creek. Even less so for Eltham. If you have a look at Diamond Creek, Eltham residents, and see if you want some of that.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Councillor Merrick.
Again, I think this it's very pertinent that Councillor Clark talked about graffiti and this. We really need to have a good look at this policy and have a good look at what its implications are. As Councillor Perkins said, if we do decide to follow through our banner program, we could end up with banners all through the place, and we could look just like Car City, which would be, some people would say fantastic, other people would consider it similar to graffiti and just be visual clutter that we don't need. So I urge the public to have a good look at this policy and have a good look at what the implications are, because it's small changes at this level open up all sorts of things at the end. So I'll be supporting the policy going out to public public submissions, but I have similar concerns to Councillor Perkins about some of the implications. Thank you.
Councillor Ashton.
I think there's a few gaps in this document, and I hope some submissions may come in to cover them. I think, we farm gate sales, all those things we talk about in the Green Wedge Management Plan, people that are just selling seasonal fruits or pumpkins, I'm not sure how they fit into this. Also, I noticed the tethered signs, which are a happy and welcome thing to see throughout Pountain Hill when the festival's coming, and I hope there's a bit of flexibility here, because again, these local communities have done things the same way for many years in a very unique way in some instances, and to have banners and things cut down because they're not pretty enough or they're in the wrong colours, I wouldn't like to see that. So I do hope we get some submissions from not only rural businesses but some of the rural festival people, because I think this is tidying things up, but it also could make it very boring. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Councillor Brooker.
Look, I really hope that we do get a number of submissions on this. I'm certainly looking. I think we generally come up with almost definitely always come up with a better policy once we get some community submissions. So I'll be looking for those to improve the policy we have. I would just say, if I can paraphrase part of it, is what we're doing. We're increasing the number of locations of signs and removing the discretion for signs and alternate locations. One of the aspects of the policy. Others concern, advertising multiple events, and others allowing for easy install and so on at various locations. The banner issue's been raised. So I think if you do wish to influence an outcome and seek to push us in a particular direction, we're scheduled to hear from you. I see at the May Future Nillumbik meeting. Let's make your submissions. Real estate agents, I think as well. This is an opportunity for you to be involved and make some submissions, as Councillor Clark said, as what you think the implications of this all are. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. It was unanimous. She was just a bit late. Our next report is 3820, the draft 2021 budget. Can I have a mover for the recommendation?
Happy to move it, Mayor. I believe there's going to be an amendment though. We've incorporated the amendment already. So the amendment is on an additional clause that Council reviews its financial hardship policy in light of the current situation as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and report back to Council in April 2020.
So just for clarification, this is a new point 3, which then makes 3 go 4 and 4 go 5. So we have 5 points in the recommendation.
So would it be better if I read out all 5 points,
I
Mayor, or
don't
should we
think it'll be
take it?
necessary. The
No?
rest of it's
Okay.
already written down. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ashton. Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. There's a number of points to go through here, and I think they're very relevant. Not distracting where we are with the pandemic currently. The state government has capped the rate cap at 2% this year, and that is partly why we've put that clause 3 in there, to be able to review that, because there are going to be some people in very awkward, difficult situations going forward, and we want to be able to review those fairly soon. The waste management is also a point to note that it's only an increase of 8.8%. If we'd have maintained the in-house services, the current base charge would have been an increase of 16.5%, so it would have been $453 odd, so it was quite a significant saving there. Council's been very proactive. This year we've got some grants to the value of $33 million. So in the way of state and federal funding, some of those include the Diamond Valley Sports and Fitness Centre redevelopment. There was $8 million there. The Diamond Creek Trail was $5 million there. Eltham Sports multi-use community facility, the tennis courts and floodlights is 1.4 there. Roads to Recovery, 580,000. Diamond Valley Library redevelopment is $500,000 there, and the Hurstbridge Outdoor Netball Court development, there's $250,000 there. So there's councils, they're just some of the highlights there. Council's been very proactive in driving those to obtain additional funding. The borrowing costs is also another area. When we came in back in 16-17, our interest was $885,000 a year. This year we're looking at $587,000, and next year we're predicting around about $483,000. So by the end of our term we will have nearly halved, that's it, halved our interest rate expenses. Property and cash flow, Council's maintained a strong growth in the fixed assets portfolio, largely due to the ongoing investments across the property and the infrastructure. Again, external grants have been assisting in that area. Cash flow, we're operating in a good, resilient program at the moment, particularly funding to investing in activities specifically to capital works. I think just in closing, Council, that this Council's been a very fiscal and responsible Council in the way that we're driving with our budget. and what we've been able to achieve. And a lot of that goes to the finance department and to Vince and his team, and all the officers as well within the group. So just in closing, well done, and looking for everyone's support on this item tonight to go out to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Councillor Ashton?
I agree with everything Councillor Rankin has said. I just want to also mention that this council is really supporting this digital transformation. 4 years ago, this council was struggling with regards to planning, customer service, and linking various data groups within the council, and that I think one of the things that the present circumstance has emphasised to us that it's so important that we're up there with new technology, with people having to work from home and people having to source information. It's even more urgent that we keep going ahead with that, and I think this budget reflects the work we're going to be doing in that space. So yeah, I thoroughly endorse this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton, and live streaming as well. Councillor Brooker.
Mayor, look, the headline takeout for most residents, I think, will be a 2% increase in the rates and an 8.8% increase in the waste management charge. All up, according to my little calculations, that should see an increase of around 3% to the rates bill of the average Nillumbik resident, with the normal caveats around individual deviations from that average depending on your individual property and its relationship to the average. The prevailing economic circumstances surrounding the budget, to say they've changed is just such an understatement. In the few weeks that have gone by, before its presentation to us this evening, we do know that there has been thousands of job losses in the last 7 days, enough to cause the Centrelink computer to crash as it was overwhelmed with Australians looking for income support as their jobs disappeared in the matter of a few days. The implications are that there will be massive pressure on our budget on the revenue side, and that requires a second look on the expenditure side. I will flag some changes I would like to see. Rates. Our council plan adopted in 2017 specified that we would increase rates by 1/4% less than the rates cap set by the government. More than ever in these times, I think we should be on target. Our council should do what it said it would do. In 2017, it was the right policy. It is necessary to show that when we made a commitment of 1/4% below the rate cap, we should stick to it. Many plans, objectives and tweaks of policies and adjustments are made along the way. Personally, I think it's important that we keep faith with our commitment of 2017 on rates. We keep faith in what we said we would do, and we keep faith in the policy direction of putting downward pressure on rates that we made in 2017. On the expenditure side of the budget is a whole kind of complex equation now, and I would certainly, now this is going out for community consultation, I would remind residents that if they want to see some adjustments on the expenditure side of the budget, they do have to make a submission to that effect. They do need to make that, we can only make changes after they make submissions. So if they want to see some changes on the expenditure side, the time to do so is through the budget process, which is going out for submissions from tonight. I do think if there's, just to use an example, council currently contract out the management of the leisure centres. We know the leisure centres are all closed. We also know that the hundreds of employees that they have are now all out of work. Most of them are casual. If they had been council...
Time, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Any other councillors who speak? Councillor Perkins.
Look, happy to support this draft budget going out for consultation. Look, I believe it's a good budget, and unlike the council plan, we strike a new budget every year. I do acknowledge that we did set in the council plan, and for 6 of the 7 councils in this room, when those decisions were made, you're all very new councillors. Now being this thing promulgated by Councillor Brooker, that we should be held to that. I'm not sure currently fits with the pressures that we as a council also are finding ourselves under in terms of wanting to roll out a capital works program. $19.8 million will be expended in this financial year on recreational, leisure and community facilities. The key projects include $8 million for the redevelopment of the Diamond Valley Sports and Fitness Centre, the Diamond Creek Trail at $6 million, the Eltham Sports Multi-Use Community Facility, tennis courts and floodlights, $4.4 million, shared pathways, $900,000, Diamond Valley Library redevelopment, $580,000, Greensboro Hockey Club Pavilion redevelopment, $540,000, and various car park upgrades in Eltham at $480,000. It's worth acknowledging and particularly thanking our local state and federal members, because we've managed to pull in grants, capital grants at the value of $15.769 million. So $15.8 million worth of capital grants. So that certainly allows a lot of these projects that wouldn't otherwise been able to be realised. Anything can change, as we know. Everything has changed, from day to day or week to week. The world's changing incredibly for us, and is this going to be the budget that we end up with, or any budget that we end up with? Things might change into the future. So this is sort of where we are at the moment. There have been some marginal increases. There's been a couple of very minor decreases, which I'm happy to highlight. I did have some people who complained only over the last couple of months about dog registration fees, and the fact that to register an entire dog was $300. That was proposed to go up slightly, but after a bit of advocacy from ratepayers, we've brought that down to $200. So rather than being $300 a year, it's now going to be $200 a year, and that goes the same for cats as well. So whether you're a dog owner or a cat owner, and if you choose to have an entire dog or entire cat, it's only going to cost $200 as opposed to $300. Now there might be some people that would like the cat registration fees to stay up at $300. Happy to take that on board.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Clark.
Councillors, it won't come as any surprise to you that I don't endorse this entire budget. I've argued since we started the debate on this budget that now is not the time to change and move away from our plan. And in fact, our plan was 0.25%. I sought to run an argument that we'd even beat the plan and do better. That's not to say we haven't done well in our first three budgets. Certainly a $400,000 saving in interest is $400,000 not going to banks, that is now going for works and programs in our community. And so there are good things that we have done in the past. But integral with those good things that we have done in the past is to keep the rates low. No one will be surprised to know that we have one of the highest rates in the dollar in the state. And that's essentially because we run a residential base and we have a very low commercial base, which puts a lot of pressure on our residential ratepayers. But I think equally, as Mr. Jeremy Loftus-Hill asked tonight, can we explain why council is intention to break away from the rates commitment? We heard the question. The answer was, we're going to debate it later on tonight, but there is no councillor who is arguing the case for the full 2% who have provided Mr. Jeremy Loftus-Hills, or indeed anybody else in the community, why move away from the plan other than we're really good at spending. No councils are anything other than good at spending. The hard part is to find the savings and to look at how we go the other way. I ran the conversation earlier on today about trying to get this concept of council reviewing its financial hardship policy in item 3 of the recommendation tonight as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there was some even reluctance at that. There are people out there that are hurting. There are pensioners from day one that struggle to pay their rates on a daily basis. There are single parents who struggle every year to pay those rates. So this won't be a rate increase across the board at 2%. Far from it. It will be 3% plus. And the reason it'll be plus is there'll be winners and losers. And for those that argue that the rural communities don't get enough, get ready for it. You will have the highest rates increases in Nillumbik. You will have the highest rate increases in Nillumbik in the rural communities. And it is the nature of where the valuations will play out. There will be some in the community where it actually does drop a bit. But the further north you go in the municipality, the more likelihood is that your rates will be greater than at a best case outcome of 3%. So to simply say, oh look, we've got things to spend it on in this environment, even before the pandemic hit, in my view, is not good enough and does not stay true to the commitments we made earlier on. There is nobody's put an argument other than, yes, we'd like to spend some more money on certain things. We'll always find that argument.
Councillor.
So I am happy for it to go out for public consultation, but I encourage the community to hold the council to account.
Thank you. Everybody had their say? If that's the case, I've actually lost track. All those in favour? And that is carried. We next have 3920, the Nillumbik Customer First Strategy First Year Delivery Update. Can I please have a mover? Councillor Rankin.
Happy to move it.
As per the papers, and a seconder, please. Councillor Brooker. Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is a really good piece of work that council officers have been working on. It's underpinned by our council plan, and the good work that they've been doing here. It sets out that we're really increasing and growing our customer satisfaction, and it's certainly evident in this document. So I certainly support it moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Councillor Brooker.
Thank you. Look, I just want to just highlight, we often talk about good work from officers and so on, and it always is. But I think the people in the customer service area at the main desk and reception who you read through the report and won a survey, came second across 145 organisations, according to an independent survey company, CSBA. What an extraordinary achievement, and I really, tip my hat to those people. Often you get some pretty tough calls, so to do really well in that independently ranked survey, I think is a credit to them. So congratulations to them. And I do think having this focus on customer service is helpful in all of that. But the people that actually have to deliver are the people that answer the phone on the customer service desk and stuff. So well done to them. And it's good to see them being recognised. So I just wanted to mention that.
Correct, Councillor Brooker. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Clark.
Briefly, just to support what Councillor Brooker said, the only other thing I wanted to add was that the customer experience survey was not only just at the front desk, but was in fact demonstrated an improvement across every service team measured and above council benchmark measures across the survey. So all teams throughout the Shire were improving. Indeed, the program has shown an improvement via a mystery shopping program of 23% in scores over 12 months, from 51% to 74%. So, I mean, I as a councillor, I'd have to say I could not fault the nature at which officers respond in both a timely and follow-up in trying to provide as much information as possible. It's never always perfect, but the attempts by officers to try and support the councillors and the community on getting things done, I think really is exemplary, and I also want to be on the record for thanking them for their good work.
Hear, hear, and it's actually getting better all the time. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, and that is carried. Next, we have a continuation of the theme, similar anyway, with our Northern Horizons 2020. Can I have a mover?
Happy to move it as per the papers.
Councillor Rankin, and a seconder, please. Councillor Clark. Councillor Rankin.
No, just happy to move it as per the papers.
Any councillors wish to speak? Councillor Brooker.
Look, I think this is this document is a solid enough piece of work, and I it's all it's quite an interesting read through for those so inclined. But maybe it's just that I don't understand it. Well, it's fine except for one part, I think, and maybe I don't understand it. But on page 22, it says, given the government renewable energy target of 50% by 2030, there is little point in a region, and I presume they mean the northern region, developing its own renewable energy generation. I suppose that they are saying that the government will somehow miraculously achieve this figure of 50%, and the region ought not to bother. Well, certainly that's how I read that. But Nillenbeck, as we know, have undertaken an investigation into a landfill site at Plenty for a site for a solar farm, and even if this paper was right that it would inhibit capacity elsewhere, my view is that the additionality of having a Plenty solar farm helps add to the whole total renewable energy mix. So that's just a comment on the paper. Thank you.
So do you understand it now or not?
I don't understand it. I don't understand it because I just think it's a curious thing to say that that they think there's little point in the northern region generating their own solar because the government's going to take here.
I know.
I don't understand it, but maybe someone with a bigger brain than me can explain it.
And
Maybe,
it doesn't say solar. It actually says renewable energy. Anyway, we will move on. Any other councillors wish to speak? Right. All those in favour, and that is carried. It's actually a really good piece of work.
Apart from page 22.
Our next motion. 4120, motions for National General Assembly of Local Government 2020. And we have heard today that the National Assembly won't be going ahead, but the motions are still going to be put into government, or to the NGA, to go on further up for advocacy with the federal government. So can I have a mover for the recommendation, please?
Happy to move it, Mayor, but do we then need to, if it's been postponed or cancelled, do we need to perhaps take part of the wording out of the recommendation?
Correct, we do.
So National
Just to
General
the
Assembly,
NGA,
full stop.
and I think just take out the date to be held in Canberra. And that should make it up to date with today's announcement. All right, we'll do that. Anybody wish to speak to it? Speak to the motion? Oh, we're going to second it, sorry. Councillor Ashton. Councillor Rankin. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Brooker, why didn't I go to you first?
Look, I think this is all very well. The recommendation that we ask for direct funding to local government. It's a little bit vague, I would say, when you say direct funding. You wonder, well, what's the government actually going to do? Certainly, I think we can do a lot with any funding at the ground roots level. But I think what the government needs to do is come up with a policy on energy. And we've been through 6 years of an emission reductions fund. There was a whole lot of talk that the Finkel review, I don't know if we remember that, but it took 6 months and then lasted a few weeks before it was lost in the kind of political discourse. We then had a national energy guarantee. That lasted, I think, only a couple of days, and then that also went kind of nowhere. So there is no national energy policy. It's not a national energy policy. There is no national energy policy. So I think what we need to do is advocate for direct funding here and really call on the government to come up with a coherent energy plan, a coherent energy policy. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Ashton.
Just quickly, I think one of the, if we look at our point A, I think this is the thing I think we need to highlight is that significant resources are required to assess and preserve the green wedge and help mitigate the social, economic and environmental impacts of bushfire. which we all know is an outcome of climate change. So I think those two are very strongly linked, and I think action on climate change is needed by the government, and we need support to do it locally. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. And this, the origins of this was aimed at Greenwich councils, and it has to be an Australia-wide motion that speaks to all councillors. So we can't just put one in specifically for ourselves, which is why it is worded the way it is, and I would have been speaking to it in that way had I been going, but as I'm not, I won't. So people... No, that's all I needed to say. That's all I needed to say. I'm talking about at the conference. So all those in favour? And that is carried. Our next meeting is 4220, the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee membership. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Rankin, all those in favour of moving this to confidential? And that is carried. Our next meeting report is 4420, Assembly of Councillors. Can I have a mover, please?
Yes, Mayor, happy to move that as per the papers.
Oh, have I missed one? What's happened? Sorry, I've missed one. 43. Too many pieces of paper. My apologies. Officers' report 4320, Audit and Risk Committee meeting February. Councillor Rankin, I presume you'll move the
That's
motion
correct.
as per the papers. And can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Jemerick. Councillor Rankin.
Just a procedural motion more than anything, but a couple of the highlights. Again, our OH&S target is well on track. Nillumbik Council is well equipped moving forward, and there's some good work being done by all the officers there again, and the chairman of the Audit and Risk Committee has congratulated all the officers on the hard work that they're doing, so well done.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Anybody else wish to speak? If not, I'll put that... Oh, Councillor Clark.
How could I miss the opportunity to highlight that I did raise under item 7, I'm sure you'll note in the minutes, the opportunity for the committee's intent to raise a notice of motion regarding the drafting of policy regarding the availability of alcohol at council meetings and events, and should just council not serve alcohol until the meeting is established and endorsed. I just note that was disclosed for our information. We had a brief conversation, and I'm sure we'll get to talk about it again.
I'm sure. All those in favour? And that is carried. And now on to 4420, Assembly of Councillors. Councillor Rankin, you're moving as per the papers?
As per the papers, Mayor.
And can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Brooker. Councillor Rankin?
No, just a procedural motion again. Thank you, Mayor.
I presume nobody else wants to speak. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. The next 4 items I'll move on block, 45, 46, 47 and 48. They are 4 tender reports to be noted. Councillors, however, can speak to any individual reports they wish to. So can I have a seconder, please? Can I have a mover?
Move them, Mayor, as Chair of Finance and Governance.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. And a seconder, please. Councillor Clark. Councillor Rankin, you don't wish to speak. Any other councillors? Councillor Brooker. 45.
Okay. This is, I believe, a potentially transformative contract for Nillumbik if it is awarded this evening. For the first time for many years, not only do all our leisure centres come under a single contract manager potentially, but those leisure centres will be managed in a coordinated way that will provide some added value to the residents of Nillumbik. We are looking for innovations from the successful tenderer that not only addresses the strategies in the health and wellbeing plan, in the positive ageing plan, in the disability action plan, but to come up with some original ideas that will see some implementation of those objectives. A single provider needs to become a trusted, valuable partner in this space. It needs to move beyond, I think, an economic relationship. This has been a large part of the evaluation process, examining how programs can be delivered and what original ideas tenderers can demonstrate that show how they can be implemented. So what we're looking for is a relationship that is embedded into the policy of the council, and that the partner, and I use that word, is embedded into our strategic objectives. And it does need to go beyond platitudes. We set the objectives, and our leisure centre managers really have to do the tough work and the thinking work, and what programs they can introduce that reduces social isolation, that accommodates older residents and their special needs, walking basketball, mixed netball, no jump volleyball. Once you start thinking about these issues, you quickly come up with ways of utilising these assets to everyone's best advantage, both younger and older residents of Nillumbik, able-bodied and disabled, special needs and others. So these facilities and assets probably have a net value of $80 to $100 million. Council is looking for a partner that can produce a return and produce a social dividend to our community that justifies that amount of capital investment they have required over the years they have taken, that they've been contributed to and constructed. The centres themselves are most likely our largest touch points with our community. I'm sure Councillor Clark would argue libraries, but there are 5 of these centres compared to 2 libraries. They are visited by thousands each week. Gym members, swimmers, basketballers, you know the list. It is an extensive one. So I want those thousands of visitors to really feel that one of the best and most enjoyable, most educational experiences of their week was their visit to a Nillumbik leisure centre, that their self-worth is enhanced, their friendships are strengthened, and their well...
Time, Councillor. Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Perkins.
Look, just briefly, I can't talk about the tender too much, but one of the things that excites me is having one provider for our 5 facilities. And what that means, in short, is if you join the gym at Diamond Creek, you could use the Eltham Leisure Centre pool all year round. That hasn't been an option in the past. You know, we've us in Diamond Creek, we've always had access to our Diamond Creek outdoor pool, but sometimes that's been with a different provider to, say, the Diamond Creek Community Centre. So if you join the Diamond Creek Community Centre as a gym member, you may or may not have even been able to use the Diamond Creek outdoor pool. But you get reciprocal rights. Basically, if you join the gym at the Diamond Valley Sports and Fitness Centre, you'll be able to use the Diamond Creek outdoor pool, or alternatively, you could consider going to the Eltham Leisure Centre, $21 million facility there. But look, I think the promise of reciprocal rights and having a more streamlined management structure across the Shire, so everybody knows what they're in for. Look, it's certainly forecast to save council and ratepayers significant sums of money, and I believe that this almost a critical mass will work very well for both ratepayers and the successful tenderer. So the tenderer will be announced tomorrow or the next couple of days, and I certainly wish them well.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, we'll put the motion for the 4 to the vote. All those in favour, and that is carried. We do now have an item of urgent business this evening in relation to the review of instrument of delegation to the CEO, which I admit at my discretion in accordance with section 6.15 of the Meeting Procedure Local Law 2017. Could I have a mover for the motion, please?
Yeah. I'm happy to move the recommendation. Perhaps I should read it, given our streamers won't see it otherwise. They can probably see it on the screen, so they can read it with me. That the Council, in the exercise of its powers conferred in Section 98(1) of the Local Government Act 1989 and the other legislation referred to in the instrument of delegation to the Chief Executive Officer, resolves that there be delegated to the person holding the position acting in or performing the duties of CEO the powers, duties and functions set out in the instrument of delegation, the Chief Executive Officer, subject to conditions and limitations specified in that instrument. The instrument comes into force immediately after the common seal of the Council is affixed, and the instrument is affixed to the instrument. C, that on the coming into force of the instrument, all previous delegations to the Chief Executive Officer are revoked. The duties and functions of the instrument must be performed and the powers set out in the instrument must be executed in accordance with any of the guidelines, policies that may from time to time adopt. It is noted that the instrument provides a power of delegation to members of the Council staff in accordance with Section 98(3) of the Act and affixes the common seal to the instrument of delegation, the Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Can I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Rankin. Councillor Clark.
I should say that, in essence, what all those words mean is the same instruments of delegation we've had in the past, with the exception of the change of the amount. We currently have an instrument of delegation of $150,000, and this is proposed to move that instrument of delegation to $500,000. The cause for that is relatively self-obvious. Whilst it's probably anticipated or not anticipated at this stage that the CEO would need to utilise the full extent of that delegated power, the unique circumstances that we find ourselves in as a consequence of the coronavirus pandemic mean that we need to have greater powers afforded to the senior management team and in particular the CEO under the Act. Why $500,000? To be frank, I don't think that number is absolutely critical, and councillors, having only become aware of this late today, that of the proposal, may well have questions in a moment, both of the CEO and any of the other council staff. Suffice to say that the current circumstances before pandemic is that Mitchell Shire already has a $300,000, Moyne Shire $300,000, and our abutting councils in Banyule and Whittlesea have $500,000 limits, and indeed Banyule is looking to increase them as a result. We don't know what the circumstances are at Whittlesea. We don't want to find ourselves in extreme circumstances where, for instance, we might not be able to get a quorum to do certain things should an absolute worst case occur in the foreseeable future. But the Shire needs to continue to operate, and we need to have due confidence in the CEO, who's aware of the powers and responsibilities and the strategic directions that we've set in our council plan and direction. I'm confident that he's not going to go outside of that, but rather with these increased delegation powers, we'll have the capacity to be able to manage the Shire in a way in which our broader community will expect in these exceptionally difficult times. We're not anticipating that there are sort of dramatic income impacts of this that the CEO would enter into, and what I mean by that directly is regarding rate relief. We already have a hardship policy with respect to that, although we will be reviewing it. And indeed, he already has powers to deal with any buildings that the council does own to support any rent relief that may be required to any tenants in buildings owned by the council. But there could be extreme circumstances, and that's what this situation seeks to deal with, the extreme circumstance, as all councils will be grappling this over the period of time. I mean, should council or should the state or federal government provide a direction that other support is required or delegations are required to the CEO or other senior officers, then indeed we could, at the discretion of the Mayor, meet at fairly short terms and provide those changes as and when required. This has been brought forward as an urgent business tonight, given the circumstances. Hoping we're not wanting to use it, but wishing our community well and supporting our CEO in the hard work that he's already been doing over the last few weeks and the executive management team, and continue to support him going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Rankin. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Perkins.
I certainly do wish to speak, and I'll speak very much against this motion. This paperwork was dropped on us just before the meeting. There was no prior notification that we were going to have an urgent item of business. Look, I just think this is wrong to force this upon council at this late hour with really no notification. The delegations to the CEO were last resolved by this council not less than 8 weeks ago, on the 28th of January. Since then, we've got a list of what the delegations are for many other councils. Some of them more, some of the same. Generally, the ones that are listed, they are larger councils, but they haven't increased their delegations either. This wasn't an issue 8 weeks ago, and I think we're jumping the gun. I think the elephant in the room for local government is that we're forced to meet face-to-face in the face of this coronavirus pandemic. That should be what's resolved, to put pressure on the state government to allow councils to meet electronically or not face-to-face. That's what we need to do. That's what the Municipal Association of Victoria is calling the state government to do. I'll read some of it out. Requiring councils to meet face-to-face goes against current advice to adopt social distancing measures to slow the spread of coronavirus. Both the Local Government Act and the new Local Government Act this year require councils to be physically in attendance at a council meeting in order to participate in council decision making. If there isn't a majority of councillors in attendance, councils cannot make a quorum and the meetings cannot proceed. So the MEV is calling on the state government to amend the Local Government Act to enable councillors to hold meetings online or to use the declaration powers under the Emergency Management Act to allow for alternate solutions. That should have been the urgent supplementary business that we should have been dealing with tonight. It's not to increase the delegations from $150,000 up to $500,000. That's over a threefold increase. We shouldn't at this time be looking to find ways to make councillors irrelevant. I strenuously oppose this motion. We've got a job to do. If we're hamstrung in terms of us being able to do it, the rules have to be changed in terms of allowing us to meet, even by circular resolution. I get to know what's going on in this community and what ratepayers' money are being spent on by seeing officer reports. So have officers come to us and look to council for a decision on contracts above $150,000 or $200,000 for carrying out works. It has never been a problem in the past. It wasn't a problem 8 years ago. The delegations of every other council hasn't changed. Just all of a sudden it's this emergency that we need to devolve our responsibilities and hand it all over to the CEO. Well, I wasn't elected to do that. I refused to do that, and I trust that the majority of council can see that this is a retrograde step. This is not what we need to do right now. We still have a quorum, and I just don't think it's the way to go. Why elect a council when you increase their delegation
Councillor.
up to this? We might as well just have administrators right now.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Councillor Demerit.
I tend to agree with Councillor Perkins. I probably not as vehemently. I think using COVID-19, and doesn't stop good governance. And I think to do something like this, I can understand why it may be needed, but I think it can also be done in a due process with explanations, with scenarios, and stepping through the process. We can have a extraordinary council meeting on very short notice. We meet weekly, so I don't know that it is super urgent business. It may be something that needs to be addressed in the next couple of weeks as the things are likely. But just to do it quickly without really having time to think about what the implications are, just because there's panic around. I think as a council, one of our things is to not be sucked into the panic, but to make solid decisions for the future of the community. COVID-19 will not be here forever, but hopefully councils will be. I know there's some councillors who don't share my opinion and think that we should get rid of them, but I think it's important that the local community has a say in its local government. As I said, I'm prepared to look at these things in the near future, but I don't think it should be something that's done with 5 minutes to look at the project. So, thank you. I'll be
Thank you,
voting yes.
Councillor Demerit. Councillor Brooker.
Look, I think I've been swayed by my colleagues there. I was kind of tempted to say this is a temporary, this needs to be a temporary thing, that this COVID-19 isn't permanent, and what we're saying we're doing here is making a permanent change. Well, I don't think that's appropriate. Maybe an amendment where you could, certainly only an amendment where you could put a date on it, be it September the 30th, October, November, pick a figure. But I do think there's some relevant points being made, and I think Councillor Demerick is correct. We've just been given it. Let's have a think about it and decide next week, or at the future Nillumbik meeting. That's all.
Thank you,
I
Councillor
think we can
Demerick.
bring it back. We could bring it back at future Nillumbik in 2 weeks?
No, we can't. Right of reply, Councillor Clark.
You could bring it back? I'm sorry. This is a one-shot deal. If this loses tonight, we can't go back to delegations of the CEO. Okay, so it could... Yeah. And yes. Okay, and if it is lost, it can't be revisited.
Sorry, councillors, through the chair. The question was, if the item is lost today, can the matter be brought back to council for a further
Correct.
consideration? So once the matter is lost, we can bring the matter back to further consideration if a council decides to bring the matter in. The mayor, you've got the discretion to submit it as an urgent business item again, or we bring the matter forward as an item through officer report.
Thank you. Councillor Ashton.
Could I just get a further clarification? If the matter
Councillor
was
Demerick.
deferred, could then it be reviewed next week?
No.
Through the chair, the question is if the matter, obviously, can it be deferred? And at the moment, this is the motion on the table. If this is lost, a further motion can be put to defer the matter. Just to make a point, though, that this item cannot be discussed at a future Nillumbik committee meeting because it's an exempt. It needs to come to an ordinary council meeting. You can go to, if we call a special council meeting, it can be heard at a special council meeting.
Councillor Ashton.
A further
Sorry.
question, just on
Councillor
process.
Perkins.
So this is being put in as an item of urgent supplementary business?
Through the chair's discretion, yes.
All right, in the process to disagree with the ruling of the chair, look, I don't think it is urgent business at the moment.
At this point in time, we're debating an item, so it's already been moved and seconded. There was no disagreement of the ruling when the matter was ruled, so we're already moved on from that matter.
Councillor Ashton.
Just another question to governance. I know in a couple of paragraphs it talks about the Chief Executive Officer to enable the Chief Executive Officer to carry out on the business of council only exercise the power subject to conditions and limitations. Are those things that we can stipulate, those conditions and limitations? Such as they only, that the CEO has this power should there not be a quorum, and for, as Councillor Booker suggests, for a number of months, or, what does that mean?
There are certain items which don't come under delegations, and I think that's what you're referring to. Could you clarify?
Sorry,
She's talking about-
the last page, review of instrument of delegations, the Chief Executive, point 9. The last sentence. Yeah, I'm just not quite sure what subject to conditions and limitations means.
So it's the conditions and limitations, so through the chair, if I can respond, the conditions and limitations as identified in the delegation, so they're stipulated in the box called conditions and limitations. So the power of the CEO is that of making decisions, and then there are exceptions to those, and they are stipulated in the box on the right-hand side.
Does that clarify your query, Councillor Ashton? Right, finally, Councillor Rankin.
Thank you. I haven't spoken as yet. Look, I can see both sides of this case tonight. Whilst I've seconded the motion, I felt that we had this thrown at us at the 11th hour. With all due respects, me, I feel that we could have had more notice about this rather than it being brought to the table just before the meeting this evening with not much time to really review or discuss it at length. In light of the pandemic that we're seeing at the moment, I will support it, but I think the state government and Councillor Perkins brought it to attention that the state government really needs to act swiftly to be able to change the legislation for local government so as that in this day and age we can use technology to be able to hold our meetings. We've been put in these positions by the community, and yet the state government will not allow us to use the technology to be able to support our communities now. The state government and the federal governments are saying we must have social distancing. You can see tonight that we're all sitting further apart, and that there's the gallery is up there via technology. Hello. But I really feel that the state government needs to come to the party very quickly and change the legislation. I'm glad that we've got a CEO that is very, very thorough and very diligent, and we've got a great team behind him as well. And that's why I actually feel comfortable in supporting this motion. But I think the process that had occurred this afternoon or this evening, Mayor, could have been done a little bit better. Thank you.
Point taken. Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Councillor Clark, right of reply.
Councillors, these are unusual times, as we've heard Prime Ministers and Premiers say over the last period. Indeed, whilst we sit here tonight pontificating on this matter, there's a National Cabinet meeting going on looking at where we're up to nationally on these particular matters. There is no doubt there are many in the community that are worried. There are many in the community that are concerned about their continued employment. And there is good reason for concern, and that's been explained, I think, reasonably well by both levels of government. I don't disagree with Councillor Perkins that it would be handy for the state government to actually enact some legislation to enable us to do, to be able to meet or deal with these sort of matters given the unique circumstances that we're confronting. But I'm not going to put our community into a position, or the CEO or executive management team in a position where we're reliant on the state government getting it right. If they thought this was critical, they could have done it. The Parliament has now risen for some weeks. They chose to sack Whittlesea and not deal with this. That's their choice. You know, Councillor Perkins has got a view that state governments would like to see us all terminated administrators put forward. I've not heard any state government say that. Don't know what unique links you've got into your local member or the Premier. If you've got any unique view that the Premier has
Point
a
of
view
order,
to
that's
that.
not the statement I made.
Oh, I thought you did. Anyway.
No, it certainly wasn't.
Do you want
But
to
the record-
clarify that or withdraw that? It's
Ask
too
Councillor Clark to withdraw that remark.
Well, I heard you say that you thought the state governments wanted all council sacked and administrators appointed. Did you not say that?
I don't believe I said that, no.
Anyway,
I
the
think
community
we'll
will
move
judge
on.
that. The principal point here is really about, you know, what's the delegation going to mean in real terms? To be honest, we don't know. I don't think the CEO sits here now to saying to my...
Very poor governance if we don't know.
Keep going, Councillor Clark.
The circumstances are that we're providing for a set of circumstances that we do not know.
Yes.
That's why we're doing this. Because last week, when we were having a conversation, we hadn't anticipated where we'd be this week. The federal and state governments had not anticipated a week ago where they would be up to now. We are simply trying to position ourselves to be in the best possible position to support our community in what way is required. Whether you want to pick another number, you know, and I think it's reasonable to say that the existing number was already too low. regardless, equally as we are making a decision tonight, no matter how much you hector from the sidelines, Councillor Perkins, as much as we make a decision tonight, we can change that decision at a period of time when this crisis has been averted and changed. We can go back to a 350,000, 300,000, whatever the number it is, at whatever council meeting we so determine. But tonight is tonight in the context of a national and international emergency. And that is what we are responding to. I don't think there's anybody in the community who's going to say, we've set ourselves up for failure and everybody's going to be sacked. Far from it. To be able to say, our broader community is going to be able to say, whether you're north, south, east or west of it, we're in the strongest position possible we can be to defend and support our community, and our CEO has the powers.
Is it 5 minutes for right reply or
team
3?
To achieve this, then that's what they want us to be able to achieve. And
Time, Councillor
tonight's
Clark.
not a point for scoring points with state governments at others. It's supporting our community and putting us in the best position.
Thank you.
Commend the resolution.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against?
Division.
All those in favour? Councillor Ashton, Councillor Rankin, Councillor Clark, Councillor Egan. All those against? Councillor Brooker, Councillor Demerick, Councillor Perkins, and that is carried. I will make one comment, and I think the last point that Peter Clark raised, or Councillor Clark raised, is a very good one. As soon as this is over, I'm more than happy to support a motion to go back to a lower figure. Mover to, well, first of all, I'd like to say good evening to our gallery, who must now leave us. The meeting will be closed to members of the public so that we can consider some confidential matters. So I'd just like to wish everybody a safe and healthy time until you can once again come back into council. This might go on for some time, so this is our new technology at work. So I wish you all well, and the meeting will now be closed to members of the public. Could I just have a mover to go into confidential? Thank you, Councillor Racken, and second, Councillor Clark. All those in favour? And that is carried. Thank you.